You know that feeling when you get one of those Nigerian prince emails? Most people just delete them and move on. But what happens when a scammer targets someone who spent 30 years tracking down criminals for a living? Well, my retired detective father decided to turn the tables, and what happened next was absolutely legendary. Before we dive in, just so you know, this story involves international wire fraud, fake identities, and a scammer who had no idea he was about to become the hunted instead of the hunter. Make sure to stick around until the end because the final twist will blow your mind. My name is James, and the man you're about to hear about is my father, Detective Ray Thompson. Though that's not his real name for obvious reasons. Dad retired from the police force 5 years ago after 3 decades of service, most of it in the fraud and cybercrime division. He thought his days of chasing down criminals were over. He was wrong. It was a Tuesday morning in March when Dad called me, and I could hear this particular tone in his voice. The same one he used to get when he was working on a case that really got under his skin. "You're not going to believe what just landed in my inbox," he said. The email was your typical Nigerian prince scam, but with a few interesting wrinkles. It claimed to be from Prince Obinna Joel, supposedly the son of a deceased oil minister who had left behind $15.2 million in a secret bank account. The usual story: needed an American partner to help transfer the funds, would share a percentage, just needed some upfront money for legal fees and transfer taxes. But here's what caught Dad's attention. The email contained specific details about his military service record. Stuff that wasn't public knowledge. Whoever sent this had done some homework. They knew he'd served in the army before joining the police force. They knew his rank. They even referenced his commendation for service in Desert Storm. "This isn't some random spray and pray scam," Dad told me. "Someone's been researching me specifically. Now most people would be creeped out and just report it. But Dad saw an opportunity. After 30 years of investigating fraud cases, he knew exactly how these operations worked. And more importantly, he knew how to make the scammers think they were winning while he gathered evidence. "I'm going to play along," he announced. "Dad, that's insane," I said. "Just delete it and move on." "Son, this guy made a mistake when he tried to use my service record against me. Now I'm going to show him what happens when you mess with the wrong veteran." Dad's first response was a masterpiece of psychological manipulation. He played the role of a lonely, recently widowed retiree, which wasn't entirely false since Mom had passed 2 years earlier. But he layered in just enough greed and gullibility to make himself seem like the perfect mark. He wrote back, "Dear Prince Obinna, I am very interested in your proposal. As a retired military man living on a fixed income, this opportunity sounds like an answer to my prayers. I have some savings from my years of service that I could use to help with the fees you mentioned." The response came within hours. Prince Obinna was thrilled to have found such a trustworthy partner. The emails started flowing daily, each one more elaborate than the last. There were fake government documents, phony bank statements, even a bogus letter from the Central Bank of Nigeria. But Dad was documenting everything. Every email header, every IP address, every piece of metadata. He was building a case file just like he used to do on the job. Over the next 2 weeks, Dad played his role perfectly. He expressed concern about the risks, asked the right questions to seem cautious but not suspicious, and gradually let himself be convinced to participate. The scammer, who Dad had started calling Prince Fake in his notes, was eating it up. But Dad also started dropping subtle hints that something wasn't quite right. He'd mentioned details about police procedures in casual conversation, reference fraud cases he'd heard about on the news, and occasionally use law enforcement terminology without explanation. "I think I'm making our friend a little nervous," Dad told me during one of our daily check-ins. "His last email took 6 hours to respond to, and he's starting to ask more questions about my background." That's when Prince Fake made his first big mistake. Instead of backing off, he doubled down. He sent Dad an email claiming there was an urgent development. The Nigerian government was about to freeze all foreign accounts, and they needed to move the money immediately. To do this, Dad would need to send $5,000 in emergency processing fees within 48 hours. "Hook, line, and sinker," Dad said when he called me. "He's getting desperate, which means he's about to get sloppy." While maintaining his innocent retiree persona, Dad was conducting a full-scale investigation behind the scenes. He used his old contacts in cybercrime to trace the IP addresses. He analyzed the language patterns in the emails for clues about the scammer's real location and education level. He even had a friend in the FBI run the bank account numbers through their databases. What he found was fascinating. The scammer wasn't operating from Nigeria at all. He was based in Houston, Texas. His real name was Marcus Webb, a 34-year-old with a history of petty fraud who had apparently graduated to international scams. But it got more personal. Dad discovered that Marcus had been specifically targeting veterans, using stolen military records to make his scams more convincing. He had hit dozens of retired service members over the past year, bilking them out of thousands of dollars each. "This isn't just about some random scam anymore," Dad told me, and I could hear the anger in his voice. "This guy is preying on people who served our country, people like my old buddies who might not be as tech-savvy or suspicious as they should be." That's when Dad decided to take things to the next level. He wasn't just going to waste the scammer's time, he was going to help take him down for good. Dad contacted his former partner, Detective Maria Santos, who was still working cybercrime. At first, she was skeptical about Dad's vigilante approach, but when he showed her the evidence he'd gathered, the real identity, the pattern of targeting veterans, the scope of the operation, she agreed to open an official investigation. "We need you to keep playing along," she told him, "but now you're working for us. This is an official undercover operation." The next phase involved Dad wearing a wire during his phone calls with Marcus. Because yes, by this point, Prince Fake had insisted on speaking by phone to build trust with his mark. These conversations were comedy gold. Dad playing the confused but eager retiree while Marcus laid on the charm with his fake Nigerian accent. But they were also building a legal case. Every promise Marcus made, every lie he told, every attempt to solicit money was being recorded and documented. After 3 weeks of correspondence, Marcus was feeling confident. He had what he thought was a lonely, wealthy veteran on the hook, ready to send money. He started getting careless, dropping the accent during phone calls, mentioning details about his life in Houston, even complaining about his girlfriend. That's when Marcus made his biggest mistake. He suggested they meet in person. He claimed he was flying to Dad's city on business related to the money transfer, and thought it would be good to meet face-to-face to finalize the deal. Dad immediately agreed, but suggested they meet at a restaurant near the local FBI field office. The FBI was more than happy to help arrest someone who had been defrauding veterans. They set up surveillance at the restaurant and had agents positioned throughout the area. Dad would be wearing a wire, and the plan was to get Marcus to explicitly solicit the money in person before making the arrest. I have to admit, I was nervous as hell that day. I know Dad was trained for this kind of thing, but he was also 58 years old and technically retired. What if something went wrong? But Dad was in his element. He arrived at the restaurant early, ordered coffee, and waited. Marcus showed up right on time. A thin guy in an expensive suit, trying way too hard to look legitimate. The conversation started exactly as you'd expect. Marcus, still maintaining traces of his fake accent, explaining the final steps needed to transfer the millions. Dad playing the eager but slightly confused retiree, asking all the right questions. Then Marcus pulled out a folder full of fake documents and spread them across the table. Bank authorizations, government forms, transfer receipts, all elaborate forgeries designed to make the scam look legitimate. "All we need now, my friend," Marcus said, "is for you to wire the $5,000 processing fee, and by tomorrow, you'll have $7.6 million in your account." Dad looked at the papers, nodded slowly, and then said something that must have sent chills down Marcus's spine. "You know, Marcus, these documents look really impressive, almost professional quality. How long did it take you to make them?" The color drained from Marcus's face. I don't know what you mean. My name is Prince Obinna, and these documents are completely legitimate." Dad smiled and leaned back in his chair. Marcus Webb, 34 years old, living at 4247 Westheimer Road in Houston. 3 prior arrests for fraud, currently on probation. Did I miss anything? For a moment, Marcus just sat there, mouth hanging open. Then panic set in. He started to stand up, gathering his fake documents when Dad calmly said, "I wouldn't do that if I were you. Take a look around." Marcus glanced around the restaurant and suddenly noticed what he should have seen earlier: the unusually high number of well-dressed customers who all seemed to be paying very close attention to their table. "My name is Ray Thompson. I'm a retired police detective, and for the past month you've been participating in an FBI sting operation. Marcus Webb, you're under arrest for wire fraud, mail fraud, and conspiracy to commit fraud." The FBI agents moved in smoothly. Marcus tried to run, but he made it about 10 feet before being tackled in the restaurant parking lot. The whole thing was over in minutes. When they searched Marcus's hotel room and his apartment back in Houston, they hit the jackpot. He had files on dozens of victims, mostly veterans, with detailed profiles of their military service, family situations, and financial status. He'd stolen over $200,000 from retirees over the past 18 months. But here's the kicker. He also had a list of potential targets that included 3 of Dad's old Army buddies. This wasn't just some random scam that happened to target Dad. Marcus had specifically researched Dad's military unit and was planning to work his way through the entire roster. The evidence Dad had gathered during his month-long investigation was crucial to the prosecution. The recorded phone calls, the documented emails, the financial records. It all painted a clear picture of a systematic fraud operation targeting veterans. Marcus wasn't working alone. The investigation Dad started led to the arrest of 4 other people involved in the scam, including Marcus's girlfriend who was helping to launder the money, and a guy in Lagos, Nigeria, who was providing the fake bank documents. Marcus tried to claim he was just a middleman, but the evidence was overwhelming. The recorded conversations where he bragged about how easy it was to fool old soldiers didn't help his case. He was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to pay full restitution to his victims. Dad was incredibly proud of the outcome. But what really got to him were the thank you letters from other veterans who had been scammed by Marcus. Some of them had lost their entire life savings and were too embarrassed to report it to authorities. "That's the real crime here," Dad told me. "It's not just the money. These guys prey on people's trust and patriotism. They make heroes feel like fools." The case got some media attention, and Dad was invited to speak at veteran organizations about how to spot and avoid scams. He always emphasized that the best defense is knowledge and healthy skepticism. If someone contacts you out of the blue with an opportunity that seems too good to be true, it probably is, he'd tell audiences. And if they specifically reference your military service or personal details that seem too accurate, that's a huge red flag that you're being targeted. One thing that surprised me was how sophisticated these operations have become. This wasn't some guy in an internet cafe sending random emails. Marcus had invested serious time and money into making his scam look legitimate. He had fake websites, forged documents, even a phone number that showed up as Central Bank of Nigeria on caller ID. But he also made the classic mistake of underestimating his target. He saw retired veteran and thought easy mark. He had no idea he was tangling with someone who had spent 3 decades learning how criminals think. Dad always said the key to being a good detective was understanding human psychology. Scammers rely on basic human emotions: greed, fear, loneliness, pride. They're not necessarily targeting stupid people. They're targeting people who are vulnerable in some way. Marcus studied my military record and thought he could use my service as a way to build trust, Dad explained. What he didn't realize is that 30 years as a cop teaches you to be suspicious of anyone trying too hard to be your friend. Based on this experience, Dad always shared these key warning signs: unsolicited contact referencing personal details about your life, urgent deadlines that don't allow time to think or consult others, requests for upfront payments or fees, refusal to meet in person or provide verifiable contact information, stories that appeal to your emotions rather than your logic. Dad's case made a dent, but the problem is far from solved. These scams are still out there, still targeting veterans and seniors. The difference now is that Dad volunteers with the FBI's Elder Fraud Task Force, helping to train other retirees to spot and report scams. Looking back, I'm incredibly proud of what Dad accomplished. He could have just deleted that first email and moved on with his retirement. Instead, he chose to fight back, not just for himself, but for all the other veterans who might become targets. Marcus picked the wrong victim that day. He thought he was targeting a lonely old soldier with money in the bank. Instead, he ran into a retired detective with 30 years of experience, a network of law enforcement contacts, and a personal vendetta against people who prey on veterans. So the next time you get one of those Nigerian prince emails, remember this story. Most of the time, the best response is to just delete and move on. But if you think you're being specifically targeted, or if you know someone who might be vulnerable to these scams, don't hesitate to reach out to authorities. And to any scammers who might be watching this, be very careful who you choose as your next target. You never know when you might accidentally pick a fight with someone who spent their career putting people like you behind bars. Dad's retired now, but he's still fighting the good fight. And Marcus? Well, he's got about 6 more years to think about the mistake he made when he decided to target Detective Ray Thompson. If you enjoyed this story of justice served, make sure to like and subscribe. I've got more stories about Dad's cases, including the time he went undercover to bust a romance scam targeting widows. Trust me, you don't want to miss that one.